Who knows, a friendly little visit like this could be the start of something. You're walking along the street, or you're at a party.
Or else you're alone, and then you suddenly dig. You're looking in someone's eyes, you suddenly realize that this could be the start of something big.
Hey, Kim here. This week I wanted to take a little time to spotlight and pay tribute to actor Johnny Crawford. Crawford's name is one which holds a very specific spot in the hearts of those with a memory or knowledge of television in the 1950s and 1960s. The actor is perhaps best known thanks to his ongoing role in the long-running Western series The Rifleman, which ran on ABC from 1958 until 1963. The show followed widowed rancher Lucas McCain, played by Chuck Connors, trying to raise his son Mark, played by Crawford, after the death of his wife. The Los Angeles Times spotlighted Crawford in an article dated February 6, 1985, entitled Goody Goody Grows into Heavy, writing, Crawford as a 12-year-old created a character that became part of our pop consciousness, at least for the baby boomers who grew up with that televised paragon of Western righteousness. Here was a truly average kid we scrawny types could identify with. The Rifleman aired its first episode, written by the legendary Sam Peckinpah, by the way, in September 1958, when Crawford was 12 years old. After 5 seasons and more than 160 episodes, Crawford had just turned 17 years old and had spent his formative years growing up on screen. Born in 1946, Crawford came from a show business family. According to the Spokesman Review out of Spokane, Washington on March 2, 2008, his father worked as a film editor while his mother was a pianist. The article goes on to mention that all 4 of his grandparents had careers in the music industry, a passion which would continue to live on in his later work. In fact, The Rifleman wasn't Johnny Crawford's only iconic role on television during this era. The actor was also part of the Mickey Mouse Club during the first season in 1955, but was among the large culling of Masketeers which happened that first year. Crawford mentioned it briefly in an August 3, 1973 interview with the Vancouver Sun. He's quoted as saying, I was fired because I couldn't learn the dance steps fast enough. Crawford's filmography lists credits as far back as 1950. An article in the Pittsburgh Press, dated the 23rd of November, 1958, reports that Crawford made his acting debut at 5 years old on a stage performance of Mr. Belvedere. However, he was on a variety of shows throughout the decade, from The Lone Ranger, Crawford even spoke at Star Clayton Moore's service when he passed in 1999, to Climax and Mr. Adams and Eve. Crawford is quoted about this period in the Vancouver Sun article saying, I was very lucky in the 1950s. TV was new and the first hour shows were a big thing because all the primetime shows until then were half hour. There was more work then. The article mentions that during this time, in a span of a little more than 2 years, he did 60 TV dramas and received a fast course on acting. And perhaps it makes sense that in all the writing on his career, even as a youngster, what is emphasized about Johnny Crawford was his professionalism. The Vancouver Sun continues, quoting him, I always felt I was a grown-up, and I expected of myself exactly what I expected of the grown-ups in this business. I took pride in what I did, and I was very serious about it. As mentioned, The Rifleman started airing in September of 1958, and the reception was warm from the get-go. The series was won in what was a lineup packed with westerns. A scan of the lineup shows more than 20 westerns airing over the course of the year. In a lineup that packed, it's really easy for a show to get lost in the shuffle. However, reviews of The Rifleman throughout the autumn of 1958 were friendly, emphasizing the bond shared by Crawford and television father Chuck Connors on screen. The Newark Advocate quotes Crawford in an article dated the 7th of March, 1985. I was dark, skinny, and pathetic looking. I was astonished they hired me because I didn't look at all like Chuck, who's big and blonde. I always played orphans or refugees. The producers must have liked something about me. The family-based structure of The Rifleman set the show apart at the time with most of the other westerns on the networks, many of which spotlighted lone figures of law and order standing up to the anarchy of the Wild West. In an era which was very stringent on gender roles, The Rifleman portrays the father and son in a very domestic situation. In fact, even early in the first season, Lucas references the complexity of being a single parent raising a growing son. He speaks often about having to fill the role of both parents. As Mark McCain, Crawford is a typically 1950s boy. He's rambunctious, he gets into trouble, and occasionally he needs his father to instill some good sense into him. But he's always teachable. At the same time, Crawford's particularly good with the dramatic scenes, a time where some kids can really struggle, and his crying rivals many of the great child actors. However, even as a young boy, he injects an awe and respect into his performance performance when working with Connors. Crawford described his co-star as larger than life in the Newark Advocate. He continues, "It was a fascinating part of my early education, listening to Chuck tell his baseball stories, or he'd be reciting Casey at bat, or he'd be doing speeches from Shakespeare. If I were putting on a Shakespeare festival, I'd sign Chuck Connors to play Macbeth." The Rifleman came to an end in 1963 as Crawford turned 17 years old. Newspapers at the time paint an upbeat portrait of the teen star, who had his eggs in a number of baskets as the series came to an end. An article dated the 7th of April, 1963, in the Times out of Munster, Indiana, quotes the young actor. "It was drummed into me by very smart people I respect that you can be a boy wonder today and a flop tomorrow. I had to be a very well-rounded person. I don't think I'm handsome, so I can't get by on looks. I'm no Laurence Olivier, so I had to work hard and study hard to improve my acting." The article continues detailing how Crawford was not only venturing into music, but he was also writing, dipping his toe into production, and was also enjoying participating in rodeos thanks to his childhood spent on a Western set. He even served in the Army towards the end of the 1960s. In the years after The Rifleman, he continued acting. His feature film credits throughout the decade include Indian Paint, which he produced, Village of the Giants, The Restless Ones, and El Dorado. He saw steady work on television shows like Mr. Ed, Rawhide, The Big Valley, and Lancer, lots of westerns as you can tell. His acting career really followed the similar path throughout the following decades, but never quite equaled what he managed in the early 1950s and 1960s. Viewers might recognize Crawford from an appearance in Murder, She Wrote, Season 2, Episode 7, entitled A Lady in the Lake, and from appearances in shows like Hawaii Five-0 and Little House on the Prairie. As I mentioned earlier, his music career started in 1961. You know those days. The presence of Ricky Nelson made it so every teenager on television had to try their hand at releasing an album. In 1962, he reached number 8 on the charts with Cindy's Birthday, and followed that up with Rumors, which reached number 12. Even as his acting career seemed to slow, Crawford seemed to lose himself into a passion for music. He formed the Johnny Crawford Dance Orchestra.
Don't go round moping, hoping happiness will come. That's not the way. It doesn't pay. If you want happiness, help yourself to some. Why don't you try to take life the way I do?
I've only recently started diving into this music myself. According to a 2009 article on leonardmaltin.com, the band was a staple in Los Angeles dating back to the 1980s. With the orchestra, Crawford tapped into music of the 1920s and 1930s, recording classics like You Were Meant for Me, Sweeping the Clouds Away, and She Reminds Me of You. The website Johnny Crawford Legacy writes, authenticity was extremely important to him, so he used only original period arrangements. Johnny also turned the band's appearances into performance art, donning a tuxedo with tails and a top hat. He would step into character and stay there, addressing the audience as though they were actually in the 1920s. The Johnny Crawford Dance Orchestra was ranked among the top orchestras of its kind in Los Angeles. Its client list included Paramount Pictures, Fox Television, the Art Directors Guild, UCLA, and USC. An album entitled Sweeping the Clouds Away was released in 2011. While the album is a bit difficult to locate, Amazon Music subscribers can listen to Crawford's station. What shines through in Johnny Crawford's career is his love and appreciation of the history of the entertainment industry. He isn't just an entertainer. He's a fan. He's quoted in the Vancouver Sun, "I love Hollywood. Its history, its nostalgia. I've lived with it my whole life." The article goes on to recount. He knows his actors and movies backwards and forwards, and if there's a silent movie buff, it's him. Thanks for going with me through this little trip down Johnny Crawford's career. I hope, if nothing, it gave you a little incentive to either dive into maybe The Rifleman or follow his music. There's a lot there to like, and I'd love to hear more. Stay tuned for more here at Ticklish Business as we honor and deconstruct the world of classic entertainment. My name is Kim. You can find me on Twitter at ticklish_biz, as well as at kpierce624. Facebook person, give us a like or a follow over at Ticklish Business Podcast. We have lots of classic entertainment content posting at journeysinclassicfilm.com. As always, if you like what you're seeing, please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.
Lenox Avenue is known for doing the lowdown, but you'll find they're not alone in doing the lowdown. Fifth Avenue's learning how they had to fall. Fifth Avenue does it now, and that ain't all. Whenever the folks high up do the mean, low down there is no low down lower than that. Whenever the swells slow down and become low down, there is no low down lower than that. You may believe it or not, when it starts getting hot, there is no Hottentot that's hotter than that. So you can lay your dough down when it gets low down, there is no low down lower than that. You may believe it or not, when it starts getting hot, there is no Hottentot that's hotter than that. So you can lay your dough down when it gets low down, there is no low down lower than